Alrighty, I'm ready to offend a bunch of Australians and enlighten a bunch of foreigners. So hey, what's up you guys, it's me Luke and welcome back to another video, or if you're new here, welcome to my channel. So today's video is not one that I thought I'd be making and not one that I thought that you guys would be interested in, but over the past couple months, whenever I've asked you guys to ask me questions or give me video suggestions, a lot of you have asked me questions about what it's like to live in Australia and just a lot of questions about Australia in general. And when I look at my YouTube analytics, majority of the people who watch my videos aren't actually from Australia, even though I live here. So I thought that it'd be really interesting for me to just make kind of an all-inclusive video. I think I'm going to be making two videos. So this first video is going to be me speaking about what it is like to live in Australia as a foreigner, and then my next video is going to be me answering all of your guys' questions. I've actually already asked you guys some questions on my YouTube community tab and on Instagram. However, if you want to ask some more, definitely leave them down below and I will try to get to them, and I could probably make more of these videos in the future if you guys want them, because speaking about Australia and what it's like living here and all of that is a lot that I can't really fit into one video. Anyway, without all the rambling, let's just get into it. So first of all, just a bit of context. So I'm 19 years old. Hi, my name is Luke Alexander. If you're new here, welcome to my channel. I'm actually from South Africa. I was born and raised in South Africa, and then I moved to Australia in January of 2012 on my 12th birthday. So I've been living here for about 7.5 years, and I became an Australian citizen in the beginning of 2018. So I now hold dual citizenship in South Africa and Australia. And even though South Africa and Australia are British colonized countries, they are both extremely different, and I just find it extremely interesting to go ahead and look into what life is like in different countries. I know a lot about what it's like to live in America from speaking to people who live there and from doing my own research, and I know a lot about what it's like to live in the UK and South Africa and Australia. Obviously mainly South Africa and Australia, since I've actually lived in both. However, those are kind of the four countries or places, if you will, that I know the most about. So when I'm comparing and contrasting things, that's kind of what I'll be speaking about. However, I would really love it if you guys went ahead and commented down below your comparisons to the things I'm speaking about, because I find it super interesting to see how other people in different parts of the world live. Anyway, without further ado, let's just go ahead and hop right on into the video. To make my disclaimer, but I will be making a lot of generalizations in this video, so please just take it with a grain of salt and try not get too offended. I will also only be speaking about my experience having lived here in Brisbane, Queensland. I have been to Sydney and I'm going to Melbourne on the weekend, so maybe I'll do an update later on. However, I don't want to like generalize the entirety of Australia. So the first thing I want to speak about is the weather, because the weather is a big point of conversation when it comes to Australia. A lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about it. Some myths are true, some aren't, and today I'm going to go ahead and get into those. Now, at the moment, it is currently June and it is winter. And I'm wearing a singlet. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what the weather is like here in Queensland. I mean, I wouldn't wear this outside. It's like a little bit windy, but to be honest, it is really quite warm. I think it's about 24 degrees today, and it is winter. It usually does get a little bit colder. I will admit, when I first came here, the winters were a little bit colder. However, they're now starting to get hotter, and I guess that's all a testament to global warming, so please stop using plastic. Anyway, a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about South Africa as well. When I tell people how I struggle with the heat here and how it's not that cold in winter, they're like, oh, but you're from Africa, isn't it really hot there? However, South Africa is actually really low down in the southern hemisphere, very close to Antarctica, and parts of South Africa do get very cold. There's been a couple occasions in my lifetime where it snowed. I'm from Johannesburg, by the way, if you're curious, which is kind of in the middle of South Africa. Our summers do get quite hot, but it's not the same heat as Queensland per se. It's more kind of a dry heat, but it's never the same as it is here. It's not quite as hot as it is here. In South Africa, or at least Johannesburg, we actually get seasons. I don't know about the rest of Australia, but for Queensland and especially Brisbane, we don't really get seasons here. You can't really distinguish the seasons. It's kind of just like you have a hot summer and a slightly less hot summer. But in terms of the weather, I know the cold places in Australia are Melbourne. Melbourne gets really cold. Sydney can get really cold as well. I went to Sydney winter last year and it was really cold there. The outback is similar to like the desert in America, where it's really hot during the day and really cold at night. I know Perth is a very dry heat, but here in Queensland where I live, we have the humidity. Queensland's summer is so wet and sticky and sweaty, and it is just it's not an enjoyable experience. And in terms of our seasons, yeah, we don't really get many. In Johannesburg, South Africa, where I used to live, we used to have really nice seasons. Like in spring, the flowers would bloom, and in autumn, the leaves would fall. Winter would get nice and chilly. Now and then it would get frosty. Summer was nice and warm. It was very balanced. Whereas here in Australia, in Queensland specifically, you really don't get that. Summer is just hot and humid. Winter is just slightly less hot. Autumn is still really hot with a bit of rain. And spring is just hot with a shit ton of pollen, and you get a bunch of allergies. That is pretty much it. We don't really get seasons. And And that is really, really great if you're kind of a beach person, because you could pretty much go to the beach all year round here, especially if you live on the Gold Coast. So that is really nice. However, I don't really get to the beach much. I spend a lot of time indoors because I'm a YouTuber, I'm a uni student, I just do. But it is nice, you know, I do appreciate the weather. I guess it's better than being in constant cold. However, it can kind of get a little bit exhausting. And I remember in high school, it was always very difficult to concentrate when you were in a classroom that was so boiling hot. So that is the thing about Australia, especially Queensland, is it does get very hot over here. And also the sun is next level. Australia has some of the highest UV rays. I think Queensland, if I'm not mistaken, is actually the state in the world with the highest UV rays. So skin cancer is very prevalent here. People are very, very stringent, but slap your sunblock. Even at primary schools, which is different, is it is compulsory for you to wear a hat. They even try to do it at some high schools. You'll see a lot of the private school kids here will wear hats, whereas in South Africa that is not the case, and I know it isn't in a lot of other countries, but here it is compulsory in primary school and compulsory in some high schools that you do wear a hat when you go outside. And if you ever go on field trips or you go to like the swimming carnival or anything like that, there will be teachers walking around with sunblock, giving you sunblock. It is a very, very big thing here in Australia, is people are very stringent because skin cancer is so rapid here. And that's another thing, is people don't really go to the beach and lay out and tan. I mean, I see some people doing it and I just think they're stupid, but for the most part, a lot of people here fake tan because the sun is just next level. Like if you go to the beach and you put on a ton of sunblock, odds are you will still get sunburned. So when I do go to the beach, and when most people go to the beach, they go for a couple hours, not like the entire day. Anyway, another thing about the weather is that people here love to talk about the weather and love to complain about the weather. I'm not sure where it's like where you are, but I work at a grocery store and I work at checkout, so I speak to a lot of people every single day, and a lot of them always speak about the weather. And I know the weather is a point of conversation, but Australians just love to complain about the weather. They're either like, ooh, it's too hot, or ooh, it's too cold. Like I get people complaining that it's cold when it's literally like 22 degrees. I'll be like, oh, how's your day been? Have you been up to much? And they'll be like, no, it's too hot to do anything. Or on another day, it'll be like, no, it's too cold to do anything. Like they just love to talk about the weather, complain about the weather, gab about the weather. It's just always speaking about the weather. And I think maybe it also is the older generation as well. It's definitely, Australia has a really, really, really big elderly population, especially where I live. There are so many elderly people. And yeah, that's something very different from South Africa. Another thing that's different in terms of people between South Africa and Australia, and I know America as well, is Australia doesn't really have as much diversity as those other countries. In South Africa, obviously majority of the people there are Black African, and the white Africans are a very small population in South Africa, and then there's a little bit of Asian people, a little bit of Indian people, but most of the people in South Africa are Black, obviously because it's in Africa. But then in America, obviously white people are the majority there, but I feel like America has a lot more Black people and Indian people, Hispanic people, Asian people than Australia does. I feel like in Australia, majority of people here are white. It's actually very rare that I see an African person. So that is a little bit different. Obviously, Australia does have the diversity. Not everyone is white, but coming from a country like South Africa, where majority of the people there aren't white, Australia is a very white country. However, the racism here is nowhere near as bad as it is in other countries. I know the racism in America is insane. Oh, I've seen some stuff, read some stuff, and it just seems crazy. South Africa, there is still quite a bit of racism. There's Black people being racist to white people being racist to Black people, and obviously that's because apartheid only happened like 20 years ago. But I feel like in Australia, obviously there are some racist people. Majority of people here are pretty accepting of people's racism, pretty chill, especially depending on the age. Like the older generation play on stereotypes when it comes to different races. Another thing to speak about is the drinking. So I know in America and other countries you have to be 21 to drink. However, in Australia it is 18. And drinking here is quite a big thing. I don't really know because I don't have much to compare it to, because obviously I've only lived here during my drinking ages. I've only been able to drink legally for 2 years. But drinking here is very big. A lot of people will do they call them like a sesh. I know they do that in the UK. They'll be like, oh, let's go for a Sunday sesh. People will go for benders, which is where they go drinking nights in a row. It's just crazy. However, what is different is Australia is super duper duper strict when it comes to drinking. Like when you get your license, you can't drink anything. You can't have like literally a stitch of alcohol in your system for the first 3 years of holding your license. Well, 4 if you count your learner's year. It's so frustrating. Like if I'm at dinner, I can't even have a drink because I will be driving, whereas in South Africa, that's not the case. Also in Australia, alcohol is so incredibly expensive. When I was in South Africa, I bought a liter of Smirnoff vodka, and it was 200 Rand, which is $20. And when I told my family that, I was like, wow, look at this cheap vodka I got. And I told them it was 200 rand. And they were like, what the hell, that's so expensive, what did you buy that? And I was like, what? This is like less than half the price of vodka in Australia. That same vodka would have been like $55 here, whereas there it was the equivalent of $20. And if you go to clubs, like a literal shot of alcohol will be $6. Like whenever I go out clubbing with my friends, we always pre-game, which I think most people do. So we will get drunk before we go and then go, and maybe I'll buy 1 or 2 drinks when I'm out, but honestly I mainly just get like drunk and then go and then club, because I don't want to pay for alcohol because it's so expensive. Because a lot of people do this and nightclubs have caught onto it. A lot of nightclubs have actually started charging people to go into their clubs, which is really annoying. And I think this one is common in most countries. I know it was the case when I went clubbing in South Africa. They are so strict with guys here in terms of what you wear. You can't wear singlets, you can't wear hats, you can't wear shorts, you can't wear sandals or open-toed shoes. They're just so incredibly strict about what guys wear, whereas with girls there are literally no rules. They can wear whatever they want, they can wear nothing, and they would probably still let them in. Also at some clubs they will use the metal scanner on the guys and then they won't do it to the girls. Also, to get into a club, if you seem even slightly intoxicated, like they will not let you in. So if we're drunk and we're going to a club, we literally have to pretend to be like so chill and sober, because they kick you out so easily. I once got kicked out of a club for literally just putting my head on my arm. Another thing in Australia, I'm not sure what it's like in other countries, but I've noticed that it's really big here. People here just love to fight. Like it's ridiculous. Like in high school there would be so many fights all the time, and when you go out clubbing you have to be careful because you could just bump into someone and somebody would might throw a swing at you and stuff like that. It's not too bad. I'm pretty sure it's not as bad as other countries. Like maybe it's worse in other countries, but in Australia it is big, and that's why there's this whole movement that has been going on for a couple of years called the One Punch Can Kill, which is where they spread awareness about violence and how you shouldn't punch people because even one punch can literally kill someone, which it has. That's how the movement started. So I do agree that Australia should have these super strict rules, but some of them are just ridiculous. Like you can't bar hop after 2 a.m. Like if you are in a bar and you leave it, you cannot get back in. They won't give you shots after 12 a.m. It's like literally so ridiculous how strict they are with the alcohol here, but I guess it's kind of a good thing. But that's kind of Australia in general. Australia is very, very, very strict when it comes to literally everything. With driving, you literally have to get your learners for a year, and then you have to sit your practical driving test, and then you're on your red Ps, and then you're on your green Ps for 2 years. It's like a provisional license, so you don't even have your open license. If you were to get your learner's license as soon as you can, and all the other ones at the earliest possible time, the earliest you'd be able to go on your open license is 20 years old, which is just crazy because I know that's not the case. I know in America, people actually start driving at 15 and then they get their like open license at 16, which is so crazy to me. I could never imagine driving at 15. That is so incredibly young. That's another thing. This isn't different to me at all because in South Africa, this is the same. I think in the UK it is as well, but we drive on the left side of the road, so our steering wheel and all that is on the right side of the car. And I always get people commenting on my videos because majority of the people who watch me are American, and they'll be like, oh my god, like you're driving on the wrong side of the road, like I'm so confused. Fuel here as well. I just think that everything in Australia is more expensive. Like fuel is so expensive, rent is so expensive. We pay rent here once a week instead of once a month, which is how it is in South Africa and most places. Phone plans are expensive. Clothes aren't too bad actually. I think clothes are kind of relatively the same. Food is very expensive, especially if you eat out. Oh my god, eating out here is so expensive, I hardly do it. In South Africa, eating out is so cheap. We literally eat out all the time because it's practically the same price as buying your groceries and cooking them and the electricity that you would use to do that. Yeah, eating out in South Africa is great. If you go to South Africa, you could eat out a ton because it's really, really not that expensive. However, in South Africa, you do have to tip the waiters like you would in America because they really don't get paid that much. I do think that's why in Australia, everything is so much more expensive. I think it's because in Australia, the pay is a lot better. I know in America, the minimum wage, I looked it up earlier, the equivalent into Australian dollars would be 10 Australian dollars is the minimum wage in America. It's like 7 something US dollars, but it's 10 Australian dollars. Whereas the minimum wage in Australia is like between 18 and $19. It depends how old you are. I get paid like $20 an hour and then like more on the weekends because I'm 19. That is kind of like the equivalent of, I believe, around 15 American dollars. So our pay here is a lot better. You could live a comfortable life being a barista or working at a grocery store. You really could. I mean, that's not what I'm trying to do, but it's just what I'm doing for now while I'm at university. But yeah, our minimum wage is really good here. So I do think that's kind of why everything's more expensive, which I think is kind of stupid. I mean, I understand inflation is a thing, but then it's just like as the wages go up, everything else goes up. So it's like, what's the point? But that is something that is a really big thing here, is everything is just so expensive. If you're a foreigner coming here, I feel bad for you because you are going to spend a lot of money. Now, before we speak about the people, let's go ahead and speak about the wildlife. I mean, I am from Africa, South Africa. However, South Africa is not like Africa like you would think. Like, it's got cities and buildings and houses and we don't have animals running around. But we did go to the Kruger National Park park. Like we do literally have lions and everything. Like we have all the African animals, except it's just not as wild as, you know, Northern Africa. It's more tamed, but we do have those animals. However, in South Africa, when I was there and my mom told us that we were moving to Australia and I was speaking to like all my friends and stuff like that, everybody was like, oh my God, like all of the snakes and the spiders and there's so much venomous things over there, you're gonna die. Like I had a friend back in primary school who used to collect scorpions and venomous spiders and snakes. Like he literally had all of these pets. Ill. So he was trying to freak me out by telling me all of the scary stuff that lived over here. But then I came here, and in the 7.5 years I've lived here, I've come across probably like 5 snakes. One of them was dead, and a few spiders. We have a lot of bugs, but like nothing venomous, you know? Yeah, it's not as prevalent as people think it is. I mean, I do hear a lot of stories about people finding snakes and stuff like that, but it's not as high of a scale as you would think. I mean, obviously it depends where you are. If you're like in the bush or if you're in the outback, you're gonna find more of that stuff. But for the most part, it's really not as intense as people like to make it out to be. In terms of koalas and kangaroos, it's actually really sad. They're like really dying off. Which, by the way, Australians eat kangaroos. What the fuck? Like, what the? You're eating your national animal. I mean, they do kind of eat the springbok in South Africa, but it's not as common. Like, I literally serve people and I will like scan their kangaroo, and I'm like, ew. Also, I think, don't get me wrong, I'm pretty sure it's legal to kill kangaroos here because there's so many of them and they're considered vermin. However, with koalas, they are actually becoming really rare. Like, when I first moved here, I would see a couple koalas in the trees and stuff like that, but I rarely ever see them anymore. It's so sad. It is literally heartbreaking because they are so cute, except they always smell like piss. And kangaroos, I've seen a couple wallabies around and a few kangaroos. When people are driving, it's actually not unheard of for people to actually hit kangaroos while they're driving, like how people drive and they'll hit deers in America and stuff like that. That is kind of a thing here. Enough about the wildlife. Let's go ahead and speak about the people, because that is obviously a really big part of the country. So I've heard from a couple of friends of mine and people who live in America that in America people are not very friendly. However, in South Africa, there are a couple of differences as well. In South Africa, I feel like everybody is quite, I don't know, for me at least, it's not as safe as it is in Australia. So I wouldn't just go walking on the streets by myself or walking to the shops and stuff like that. So people in South Africa are a lot more kind of reserved. And whereas here in Australia, I feel like people are very, very friendly for the most part. I mean, I serve a lot of people during the day. I have a lot of customer service. Obviously, we have horrible customers, but it's nothing like America. I've seen those videos and stuff online and I've heard some stuff about what the customers are like there, and fuck, that just seems insane. People here for the most part are really friendly. You will be walking down the street and somebody will just be like, good morning, and they'll wave at you. And yeah, people are quite friendly over here. People are very uno of the other in terms of like, I feel like masculinity and femininity are still a very big thing here. Like I serve a lot of stay-at-home moms and a lot of housewives. It's quite common here for like the men to go to work and the mothers to stay home and look after their children, which isn't really as big of a thing in South Africa. I'm not really sure what it's like in America or the UK, but yeah, there's still kind of like a 50s mindset in some aspects. Like I serve a lot of women where they're like, oh, you know, I just gotta do the wifely duties today, gotta go home and clean the house, pick up the kids, do that. Like they just have that typical housewife life, whereas the men will go and work. And there's kind of a very, men have to be macho tough kind of thing. They call them blokes, like, oh, you're bloke, and my missus, they call the girls their missus. Obviously this is more kind of like the older generation. I feel like with the younger generation that's kind of fading out a little bit, but there is still that huge mentality of like, ooh, the boys and the girls to like kind of split up, and the boys will go out drinking and stuff like that, and it's kind of how it is. Now in terms of the slang, because that's probably what a lot of you are looking forward to, there is a lot of slang in Australia. They love to shorten everything. Like instead of saying I'm going to the train station, they'd be like, I'm going to the trainer. Instead of saying I'll meet you this afternoon, they'll say I'll meet you this arvo. Instead of saying let's get breakfast, they'll say let's get brekkie. They'll even do it with people's names. Instead of saying Dave, they'll say oh Davo. Instead of saying Steve, they'll say Stevo. And in terms of some of the really popular sayings you hear people say, there's the whole like g'day mate, and some people do say that, but it's usually just kind of like the typical Australian like 50-year-old men. It's not a super common thing. There's a lot of common phrases. Like I know when I first came here, if I bumped into somebody, I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry. And if you're in South Africa, they'd be like, oh, you know, don't worry, that's okay. Whereas here they'll be like, you're right, like you're all right, but you're right. And then there's the whole shrimp on the barbie thing. I feel like this has been said a million times, but shrimps here are called prawns, and people do not cook them on a barbie. They cook meat on a barbie, which in South Africa we call a brawn. I feel like I didn't speak about much about South Africa in this video, but there are a lot more differences between South Africa and Australia, and a lot more things I could speak about in terms of what it's like to live in Australia. So if you would like me to make another video like this, definitely give this video a big thumbs up so I know you enjoyed it, and leave me a comment down below with any questions you have or any comparisons you have. I would love to go ahead and read them. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe, turn on the post notifications bell, and make sure you follow me on all my social medias that are just linked down below. Alrighty guys, that's it for me in this video. video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in my next one. And I hope that you have a great day or night, wherever you're in the world. Bye! It's not for me to say you